got to Norway from Vancouver. We flew south to Seattle, where we connected with a flight from Seattle to Frankfurt, Germany, and in Frankfurt, Germany we got a flight north up to Oslo. Norway is in the extreme north of Europe and is bounded by the Atlantic Ocean, Sweden and Finland. Norway is a constitutional monarchy, and on a rise overlooking the city is the Royal Palace. The Royal Palace is in bad state of repair, and when we were there they were actually replacing the roof. These are portraits of the previous Queen and King. They have mainly ceremonial powers. The palace guard, called the King's Guard, performs sentry duty outside the palace. A changing of the guard ceremony takes place each day at 1:30. The new guard march in. And form up. Meanwhile, the old guard prepare to be relieved. They march out and form up and are reviewed by the officer. After that, each sentry is relieved in turn. The coat of arms of Norway is a lion rampant with an axe facing to the left, surmounted above by a crown. The seat of Norway's parliament is the Stortinget. The Storting has 169 members elected by proportional representation. The interior of the building is very attractively decorated. An architectural gem on the waterfront in Oslo is the Opera House. The building is covered in Italian marble with white granite and made to appear to rise from the water. The roof of the building angles to the ground level, creating a large plaza inviting pedestrians to walk up and enjoy the panoramic views of the city. The interior surfaces are covered with oak to bring warmth to the spaces in contrast to the coolness of the white exterior. An attractive carved screen is illuminated from below and behind to give the impression of melting ice. The view from the Opera House roof is very pleasant. Beside the Opera House is this floating sculpture made of stainless steel and glass panels called She Lies. It turns on its axis in line with the tide and wind and offers changing experiences through reflections from the water and the transparent surfaces. Also, City Hall is the capital's most important venue, hosting about 300 functions each year, the most well-known being the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony. Passing through a succession of historic rooms, visitors can appreciate the works of Norwegian art. This mural depicts life from birth through to death of Norwegians. The Nobel Peace Center is a showcase for the Nobel Peace Prize and the ideals it represents. All the Nobel Prizes are administered by Sweden, except for the Peace Prize, which is administered by Norway, as per Nobel's will. There are some interesting and quite attractive buildings around the centre of Oslo, and it's a very pleasant city to walk around and view the architecture. Rosenør Park is in the city and contains the largest collection of sculptures by a single artist, Gustav Vigeland, in the world. The park features 212 bronze and granite sculptures, all designed by Gustav Vigeland. This fountain is fabricated from bronze and adorned with 60 individual reliefs. It portrays children and skeletons in the arms of a giant tree. The fountain suggests that from death comes life. Throughout the park there are sculptures in various poses. This sculpture is the Wheel of Life and is a symbol of eternity. It's men, women and children holding on to each other. This is a statue of a man lifting a girl with one hand, and this is of an unhappy child. At the highest point in the park is the Monolith Plateau, which houses the Monolith Totem and 36 figure groups. The Monolith Totem is carved from one solid piece of stone. It took 3 carvers 14 years to complete the monolith carving alone. The Vikings were a seafaring people based in Scandinavia who raided, traded, explored and settled in wide areas of Europe, Asia and the North Atlantic islands. They used wooden longships with wide, shallow draft hulls. They were used to facilitate everyday transport across seas and waterways, exploration of new lands, raids, conquests and trades. They also had religious importance, and people with high status were sometimes buried in the ship. There are many beautiful museums in Oslo, and one very interesting one depicts life in Norway over the ages. In the old days, life was very tough in the country, and people lived in these huts made with logs covered with grass. Although when you go in now, they seem as though could be quite cozy. But in the harsh winters, they might have been life might have been quite. Lumber was the main source for construction in the old days, and these houses have been brought in and re-erected in the museum grounds. It shows life, what it was like. See the very large logs that were used to construct these houses. Stave churches were once common all over northwestern Europe, but most of the surviving stave churches are in Norway. The name was derived from the building's structure of post and beam. The churches are all wood construction, and most of them are very ornate inside. Roald Amundsen was the great Norwegian polar explorer who led the first expedition to reach the South Pole. The Fram was the ship he used to sail south. It was the strongest wooden ship ever built, and had reinforced metal sheeting to protect it from the pressures of the ice. In the Fram Museum, there are these models of the Fram as it would appear encased in ice in Antarctica. Another famous Norwegian explorer was Thor Heyerdahl, who in 1947 sailed the raft Kon-Tiki across the South Pacific from South America to the Polynesian islands. His aim was to show that the Polynesian islands could have been peopled by people who sailed across from South America, because there's a lot of features that he saw similar between the cultures of Western South America and the Polynesian islands. The raft was constructed from balsa wood logs and used all available material that would have been found in South America to make the voyage as authentic as possible. I rather like this quote by Thor Heyerdahl. We decided to go on a week-long trip from Oslo by train down to Bergen, then by ferry down to Stavanger, and then by train back to Oslo. The first stage of the trip was on the Oslo to Bergen railway, and soon we were out passing through very attractive Norwegian countryside. At this time of the year it was very green, and before long we climbed up into the mountains and we went past nice lakes with snow-covered mountains round about. At Myrdal station we left that train and it continued on its way. We were then going to get the Flamsbana train for the 12.5-mile rail journey from Myrdal station down to Flam. The elevation difference between the two stations is 2,831 feet, and there are 10 stations, 20 tunnels and 1 bridge. The maximum gradient is 5.5%, that's 1 in 18, making it the steepest standard gauge railway in Europe. This is a map of the route, with Myrdal station on the right and Flam station down by the fjord on the left. This is a very popular tourist train, and here Morris settles in for the trip down to Flam. A little Norwegian house by the rail track, and then wild countryside. On the way we came to this very spectacular waterfall, and the train stopped long enough for the passengers to get off and take photographs of this amazing sight. At Flam station we got off the train and boarded a ferry for a very spectacular voyage round through the fjords. Along the way the ferry stopped at some little towns, and we were able to admire the beautiful scenery. Eventually the ferry docked and we left the ferry and got on a bus for a very spectacular ride down a very steep gradient, 1 in 18. This is one of the steepest gradients of any road in Europe. met a cyclist pushing his bike up the hill. If this was Moira, she'd be cycling. Eventually we got down into the valley and joined the Oslo to Bergen rail again, which took us the rest of the way to Bergen. Bergen is a major trading port for Norway and is a centre of aquaculture, shipping and the offshore oil petroleum industry. Bergen is also noted for its panorama of Hanseatic buildings along the harbour waterfront, putting it on the list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Moving away from the waterfront into the hills behind, there are attractive narrow alleys leading upwards with beautiful wooden buildings on each side. There's a nice lookout on the hill behind the city, and this is accessible by a railway car which is pulled up on a wire rope. At the midpoint on the track there's a loop where the two cars, the upwards and downward car, can pass. The view from the lookout is very nice with the city laid out below. Bergen is a busy cruise ship port, and here the P&O Oriana leaving port after the day and heading out towards the ocean. Another cruise ship at a different dock. Then it's back down to the city on the rail car again. After our stay in Bergen, the next stage of our trip was to take the ferry down to Stavanger, and this was along the coast through the islands, and it was a very pleasant trip. On the way out of the harbour we passed many ships to do with the petroleum industry. These are special purpose built ships, a bit like trucks, that go out to the rigs in the North Sea and service them. This one here has got a helicopter pad ahead of and over the bridge. The trip down to Stavanger took about 8 hours, and the ferry was quite comfortable. It had a cafe and the scenery was very pleasant. In Stavanger we got a ferry and went on an 8-hour cruise up Lindensfjord, which is one of the major fjords in this part of the country, and very scenic. The cliffs which were formed during the Ice Age by glaciers are very sheer down into the water, and the fjords are very deep, so that cruise liners can go very deep into these fjords. As the boat moved along the fjord, we came to this area where these goats up on the hill were completely isolated and couldn't get out. And as the boat approached closer, the goats came running down, and the crew of the boat threw food to the goats, which is supplements their diet. High on the cliff on one side of the fjord, one can see Preacher's Pulpit or Pulpit Rock, a steep, massive cliff 604 meters above the fjord. The top of the cliff is 25 meters by 25 meters and is almost flat, and is a famous tourist attraction in Norway. Despite the fact that it is unfenced, there were no fatalities until 2013 when somebody actually fell off the top of the cliff, but there have been suicides and suicide attempts. In 2000, an Austrian woman and a Norwegian man committed joint suicide by jumping together after meeting on the internet and forming a suicide pact. The Kajrak bolt is a rock wedged in a crack in the mountains, 1,000 meters above the Lindesfjord. For most people are content to enjoy the view from a distance, but for some the greater thrill is to climb out and stand on top of the rock. When we got to the end of the fjord, we turned round and headed back down through the fjord to Stavanger, where we got the train back to Oslo.